Can I tell you a secret? I don't think true crime documentary should be treated as just entertainment. I think it's journalism as well. And I think that tension between true crime as a form of entertainment and as legitimate journalism has been demonstrated very well in Netflix's Can I Tell You a Secret? Can I Tell You a Secret focuses on the story of Abby, Leah and Zoe and explores how their lives were ruined by this stalker over a several year period that culminated in the man who did this going to prison for 9 years, the longest ever sentence for any stalking in the history of the UK Criminal Prosecution Service. The reason I started this video by saying that there's an inherent tension between entertainment and as journalism in this show is because the first half of this programme or film, and I feel like a massive arsehole for saying this, was really, really slow, almost irritatingly slow. However, now upon reflection, I think that it had more than enough reason to be the pace it was at the first half. Because the first half of the documentary, because it's a two-parter, focuses on the lives of the three women that were affected by this stalker's actions. It gave context to who they were, what their lives were like, where they wanted to be in life, their dreams, their aspirations, what they do, their families. And you do get a good sense for who they are. And that's really important because as you find out within this documentary, when they do try and go to the police, which is something I've echoed in a previous review for another body, is that the police can't really do anything. And I think there is probably systemic reasons for behind that. But essentially their attitude was that you have to be SA'd or you have to be murdered before we can do anything. And that was the truly scary and upsetting thing to watch in this show. Which also makes me feel really bad for saying that it was frustratingly slow the first half. But it was necessary, and now upon reflecting it was necessary that it was that slow because these three young women whose lives were actually destroyed and who have irrevocably changed themselves because of what this man did to them, is important for it to be told in that way and for them to be given a voice and given the time to talk about it because for so long they didn't have a voice to talk about it. So I'm eating my initial words that I was going to put on this review, and I think the documentary might be less well received in terms of as a film and maybe less entertaining, but goddamn it, I think it's a better piece of journalism because of it. And I think that it's important in that case. However, I do have maybe a genuine criticism with the show, and that is the art direction. I actually like the art direction of the show. I thought it was pretty cool. There was the use of the pylon wires, in which takes and receives obviously all your data and information over the internet so you can communicate to people on Instagram, Snapchat, WhatsApp, whatever. And it shows them lighting up like a piece of electricity going along, glowing and illuminating the ground below. But it does this so many times in the show. It kind of almost leans on it as a crux, as a visual crux. It's not really a motif, but kind of almost like a hammer to bonk you on the head of, do you get it? Do you get it? They're sending messages and they can go anywhere. Do you get it? And it's like, yes, we get it. But you've done this already 15, almost 20 times in the first half, and it's just, after a while, it gets a bit obnoxious. Though I do like it as an idea and I think it looks good, it's just overused. It's not even a motif anymore, but a crux. And there's also this kind of gimmicky voiceover that they use, like a voice changer thing. And I don't know if it's because of I'm British, and then to hear a British or Lincolnshire based accent over with this voice changer, it just sounds kind of corny. It's laughable. It kind of takes you out of it. I get why they did it though. I do get why they did it. It's just it just doesn't really work in this case. But there is this kind of 3D emoji face that they kind of turn from a smile into a really creepy kind of sinister smile. And you know what? I think that worked. So mixed bag in terms of the art direction. I think the ideas were good. I just think they were overused. So props to Ben Watson for the art direction. It's just I wish that either some more ideas were used if they were going to look for more visual stuff, or those ideas that were included were just cut down. However, I will say this, I did really like the cinematography, which was done by Jamie Carney, Tom Duran and Anna Patarikina. They did this really good thing, kind of like framing the young women and the who were the victims in this kind of like piece to camera situation, not dissimilar to what we're doing right now. But it kind of made them smaller in the frame, and it made them look vulnerable, and it did elicit a more emotive, effective response in me, at least. I thought that was good. But there was also, you know, the art direction mixed with the cinematography worked really well. I did like the dolly work that was being done to follow the pylon wires, and the drone shots of the sea with the pylons in. You know, I thought it was quite evocative imagery, and something you don't think about in terms of all this infrastructure that there is everywhere, so we can communicate, and how it can be bastardized and abused by people, and is basically pervasive in society. And, you know, when you're talking about stalking and cybercrime, that's quite scary. You know, that's not just to send pictures of your cat TMA. It could be, you know, messages that destroy your life. So props to the cinematography, for sure. One criticism, but now I'm thinking actually was a positive of the documentary, was the timeline of events was really unclear. I could not tell whether this was going on over a day, a week, a month or several years. And then when you find out in the second half that actually what this guy was doing, stalking, destroying people's lives by, you know, phishing and taking personal information, by impersonating these victims to their families and friends, was doing this for a decade, from they were in probably like secondary school to being, you know, in the mid-20s. That's scary and really disturbing. So that reveal that was delayed later on, I felt like it wasn't delayed purposefully. Whether it was, it wasn't clear, but it did have an effect of when it was revealed, and it was pretty shocking, to say the least. So I don't know whether that was a good thing or a bad thing, but it did stick out in my mind for sure. There is a little mention at the end of the documentary of the fact that the man who did this was autistic and on the spectrum. Now, I think that this could have been maybe explored a little more. I did like that they brought on someone who was autistic as well, who was, I think, a psychologist, and they spoke about it. And that gave it a little bit more credence as opposed to someone who isn't autistic or just a researcher, because I know that there is a tendency or a controversial kind of current within the research of autism that is people who aren't on the spectrum, who don't, therefore kind of like, not say that they don't understand it, but it's almost like a medicalised thing, rather than there's a lack of empathy. And I think having someone who has a lived experience of autism, I think was important to include them as an expert on the documentary to discuss it. And I also thought it was really interesting that they said that it's annoying that they was even kind of like brought up and used as potentially a reason for why this man shouldn't go away, because they quote unquote didn't know what they were doing. And I think it's clear when you watch the documentary that this person did know what they're doing. But I thought it was interesting. It probably could have been it could be explored further, but I think that's just my interest in the topic rather than it being that it should have been explored more, because the focus clearly is about the harm that this person has caused to these young women, and I think actually talking about that more than they actually did would have detracted from that and brought the focus onto the perpetrator and the motivations and things. And I think that's not as important. I think what is important really is the effects that it has on these people's lives and learning from that. Because this is the longest ever sentencing for online stalking, ever. 9 years. So it's a landmark case, and I also like that it showed a kind of hero's journey for the police officer that was involved in breaking this case. I don't want to say he's just a bobby on the beat, but he's not like some DCI or high up inspector. He was a police officer, one that you probably see walking on the streets maybe as a CPSO. And to see his kind of attitude change and how it was different from the rest of their colleagues in terms of not just kind of like ignoring it or saying I can't do anything about it. He kind of made it clear to them by calling them and saying, look, I care, but I can't do something right now, but I'm going to try. And I thought that was really compelling, and I like seeing stories on the ground of people in these jobs but achieving amazing things because of who they are and the hard work. So I thought that was really compelling, and I'm really glad that they included the police officer who cracked the case in there. If you look on IMDb, can I tell you a secret, it has around like 5.4 out of 10. And the one review that I read was that it was too slow, and that was the main bugbear. and that it was kind of cheesy like American crime dramas are, because they prefer British ones because they were more gritty and they didn't do all the sound effects and voiceovers and things. I'm going to disagree. I'm going to say, actually, whilst it was slow the first half, and that if that is the main bugbear for people, which I can see it is, I think that made it a better piece of journalism, because it gave credence, it gave time to the voices of the victims of this awful, awful case. So for that, I think you might say it's a worse piece of entertainment, but I don't think documentary, and certainly true crime, should be treated as just entertainment. I think journalism, as this documentary has shown, is more important than just entertaining people or even educating them. I think that for these three women, it was probably way, 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 way more important that their voices were heard, because it was 10 years that this was going on. And I know if I was in that position, I'd want my voice heard. Never mind, wouldn't care what Netflix's numbers were at the end of the day, whether Mindhouse production and Louis Theroux did well up the back of this. I won't care. So I'm not going to care that the first half of this documentary was a bit slow. Watch it. It's worth your time. Just know that the first half's slow, but it's worth your time, because good journalism is worth waiting for.